Welcome to a Good Enough Lap Guide in the Ford Mustang GT4 at the Hungaroring, your lap guide to move up through the splits. The purpose of this video is to give you guys a foundation that you can build a solid, consistent lap off of. Once you can run those solid, consistent laps, you get in the race with the goal to finish the race, you will move up through the splits. First, we'll talk about the track characteristics of the Hungaroring. To me, this is a tight technical track. There's a lot of elevation changes, there's blind corners, there's nice sections with rhythm, sweepers, and there's a couple switchbacks. So it's a real fun track in that sense that it's technical. You can learn a lot from this type of track with all the different types of corners, going through off-camber corners, elevation change corners, blind corners. That being said, there's not a lot of room to pass here. I don't really see any honest opportunities to pass, maybe coming out of 14, going into turn 1. Maybe if they mess up the kink in turn 3, you can get a pass on them going to turn 4. But this really is one of those tracks where you're going to put pressure on your opponent and you put yourself in the right position to take advantage of that mistake. One other thing to note about this track is they're very strict on the 1Xs, so you got to keep it really tight and tidy around the track. Next, we'll talk about the car characteristics of the Ford Mustang GT4. So it's going to have a little understeer on entry and middle going around this track. So you really want to make sure you hit your braking points, get your turn-ins right, and you don't overdrive the entry in the middle of the corner. Then on exit, because there's so many tight, high radius corners around this track, you got to be really gradual with getting back on the throttle. So it's a great track for learning throttle control and patience getting on the entry and middle of the corner. The weather for this lap was 65 degrees Fahrenheit or 18.33 degrees Celsius. The track temp was 67 degrees Fahrenheit or 19.44 degrees Celsius. The lap time was a 153.335. Sector 1 was a 39.490. Sector 2 was a 44.961. And Sector 3 was a 28.884. Alright, let's get into the lap. For turn 1, we're going to brake about 50 feet before the 100 marker. And then we'll start our turn in when the curb starts. It's going to be a middle late apex for the corner. You can see when we get back on the throttle, we're just going to give a nice gradual throttle progression so we don't spin out. For turn 2, we're going to brake right before the 100 marker. Then we'll begin our turn in where the curb starts. This is one of those corners that's real easy to overdrive entry because it's off camber. We're going downhill. We're going to get to the curb and then we're just going to hug that curb all the way around. You got to be really patient before you get back on the throttle to set you up the best for turn 3. For turn 3, this is going to take some feel, but this is where I begin my turn in for the corner. I'm going to crack the throttle just a little bit because you can lose stability going over this curb full throttle. Turn 4 is one of the trickiest corners on the track because it is a blind corner. We're going to start braking just before the white line that goes across the track or that telephone pole line that's going across the track. And then we'll begin our turn in right here. I use this sign ahead as my indicator of where the apex should be and where I should be aiming. This is one of the curves we can cut over. You just don't want to cut more than I did or you will get a 1X. Once again, this is another one of the sections. It's going to take some time for you to get used to the flow of it, but this is where I brake and begin my turn in for turn 5. For turn 5, I like a more narrow entry into the corner, and then we're going to be aiming for a late apex. Once again, you can see we're going to be gradual getting on the throttle here because we are still going through the corner. When we're getting on the throttle, we can't stab it or we'll spin out. For turn 6, we're going to brake just past the 100 marker, and then our turn-in point will be just past the curb. This is one of those corners they're super strict on. You can cut over the curb a little bit. Any more than I did, you'll get a 1X. Same thing with turn 7. Can't cut it much. You can cut it a little bit. For turn 8, no obvious braking point, but this is where I brake and begin my turn in. This is another one of those curbs you can cut over. It does throw the car up in the air a little bit, so you just got to be used to that. When you go over it, don't give it full throttle or you will spin out. Now we get into the rhythm section of the track. This is where I brake and lift, but it'll take you a while to get the whole flow of this track. It's just a whole bunch of rhythm. And it'll be a later apex for the corner. Also note through all these corners how gradual I am getting on the throttle. Turn 10, we're going to hug the inside of the curb. You just want to get yourself set up for turn 11 where we'll be braking at the 100 marker. Then we'll begin our turn in after the curb. It'll be a middle late apex for the corner. And then we're going to ease on the throttle again. For turn 12, we're going to brake about 30 feet before the 100 marker, and then our turn-in will be at the curb. It's going to be a middle to late apex. This is another one of the curbs we can cut over. Turn 13, we're going to brake just after the curb starts on the right, and then this is where we're going to begin our turn in. And then it'll be a late apex for the corner. For turn 14, our braking point is going to be about 30 feet before the spotter stand on the left, and then we'll begin our turn in just before the stand. For this corner, I'm still undecided on the line. I actually did the race before I finished this video, and I was seeing guys swing it out a lot wider than me and then coming in for the later apex. I'm still more comfortable with running an inside line around the corner. In this lap, I do get too much of the curb on the middle exit part of the corner, so it kicks the car loose, so don't do that. But practice this corner, see what works best for you. And that's your good enough lap guide in the Ford Mustang GT4 at the Hungaroring. If you guys enjoyed this video, found it useful in any way, please hit that thumbs up button. If you'd like to catch the next one when it comes out, subscribe, and I'll see you there.